Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Indianapolis-based jazz saxophonist, composer, and educator Amanda Gardier. She talked to the program about her latest 2019 CD called Flyover Country, and her influences come from the likes of Miguel Zenon, The Bad Plus, Walter Smith III, and Bjork. Her first release with Green Mind Records called Empathy was called a debut with a lot of something for everyone. Over the years, she has been busy touring, recording, making her own family, and she gets into this and so much more. So please get to know her and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
So talk to me about Flyover Country. How happy are you with this release, and kind of did it live up to your artistic vision of how this was going to come out?
Yeah, this was a fun project to work on. I'd had the music written actually for a pretty long time, and I was trying to decide what instrumentation would fit the composition best and where to record it. And I was trying to decide on those decisions, I actually found out I was pregnant, which made the whole recording process really interesting. I had to wait until the first trimester was done because I was sick every day. It forced me to make some quick decisions that I think ended up being for the best, so I didn't just mull over it too long. And when we recorded, it's a lot smaller of an instrumentation than my first album. My last album had 6 to 7 people on it, and this time it was just quartet, me, piano, bass, and drums, and that was really fun for me because I liked that it just really made the melodies and the compositions, I think, speak really clearly to listeners, and it created, I think, some more intimate moments as a group. So I'm really happy with how the album turned out.
So your first release with Green Mind Records, Empathy, All About Jazz, said it was a debut with a lot of something for everyone. How did that feel to get a good review? Because that's a pretty good jazz review.
Yeah, that was nice. You never know what to expect when you put stuff out there. You kind of do stuff that you like and hope other people respond to it. So I was really glad. I mean, the great thing about that project was the other musicians on the project were just so great, and they put a lot of time into learning the compositions. They really brought a lot of creativity to the project as well, and their own suggestions. So I felt fairly confident that it would be received well, but I was definitely glad that it was.
Right on. So talk to me a little bit about the beginnings of your life. Where were you born and raised? What was your childhood like?
Technically, I was born in Connecticut, but I really haven't spent any of my life on the East Coast. We moved to the Midwest, I think, maybe before I turned 1. And I spent most of my childhood actually growing up in a suburb of Chicago, St. Charles, Illinois. And I think that had a big influence on who I became as a musician, because I was really lucky to grow up in a school district that had a really big emphasis on the arts, and specifically jazz. You know, I was able to start in jazz band in 6th grade, and my jazz band director was really great about, we would start every rehearsal before school actually listening to jazz recordings. Every day we would listen to, the Count Basie Band, Duke Ellington, Paul Adderley, Miles Davis, and actually the album that he played for us that really first sparked my interest in jazz was Maceo Parker, Life on Planet Groove. And that was like the first one that I was like, this is really cool. And that, that's when I started, transcribing some of his solos. And so I'm really fortunate that at an early age I had people getting me interested in jazz that, otherwise I would have never been exposed to. My parents didn't really listen to it. And then same with high school, we had really good band directors. And in fact, if you've ever heard of John Wojciechowski, he's a great tenor player in Chicago. He was actually one of my high school band directors as well. So I had a lot of really good, authentic instruction in jazz from a young age that really helped spark my interest in this music.
So did you always know that you wanted to become a professional jazz musician?
Not necessarily, even though I really liked music a lot, and I was really passionate about it. I was also a really passionate soccer player growing up, and my original game plan was to try to play soccer in college and maybe go into physical therapy, things like that, maybe sports medicine. And then towards the end of high school, I really started to notice, all my closest friends are musicians, and these are the people I seem to get along with the best. And, I was thinking of the most meaningful moments in my life, and I was like, feel like they were all going to see live music or, listening to recordings. And I was like, maybe this is actually more meaningful to me. And I kind of made the decision right then my senior year of high school to switch to music. And I think it ended up being a really good choice.
So your tastes are pretty eclectic. I mean, you like Bjork, Miguel Zenon, the Bad Plus. How did you kind of acquire those tastes of I mean, they're pretty hip collection of people.
Yeah, I've always had an interest in a lot of different types of music. Because like I said, in middle school I was exposed to jazz early on, and I really liked listening to that. But I was also kind of a metalhead as a teenager. My favorite band in middle school and high school was Megadeth, and I listened to a lot of like thrash metal and stuff like that. So I think I just listened to a lot of different stuff, and then now as I'm getting older, I think it makes me more open to listening to different things. I don't necessarily feel like because I'm a jazz musician I can only listen to straight ahead jazz. I definitely find that my musical voice is influenced by a variety of different types of music, including still metal and more kind of out there pop music like the stuff from Bjork, but then also just more straight ahead jazz stuff.
So how did starting your own family affect the way that you approach music and write it and go after it?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, the first most obvious thing is when I found out I was pregnant, I was kind of like, oh, that's what I get for waiting too long to record this music. So it definitely kind of taught me a lesson in, when you have new music, it's important to put it out there and not just sit on it. It's always important to be putting new projects out into the world, not only just to kind of satisfy that creative itch in yourself, but also because you never know how your music's going to affect other people. I know I get really happy and excited every time, someone like Miguel Zenon puts out a new project. So you never know what kind of impact it'll have on someone else. So that was part of it. It kind of taught me a lesson in not waiting too long. And it's been interesting because the range of emotions you go through when you find out you're expecting from, being really nervous and terrified to finding actually a surprising amount of calmness in yourself. When you're a woman and pregnant, you're kind of forced to be calm. And I'm usually kind of a high-strung, kind of high-energy person. And it's been kind of neat finding a different side to myself. You're forced to find time to relax and kind of just chill out and not do anything, which I used to otherwise hate. But I think it's actually good. It kind of forces you to reflect a little bit. And I'm really excited to see how that kind of feeling will affect some of my new compositions in the future.
The one thing about jazz is that it almost seems like there's kind of this underground popularity of it. Lots of people go to school, study it, and become musicians, but it's not in the mainstream. So my question is, do you feel like jazz is in good shape in America in 2020?
That's a good question. I think it is. I think there's a lot of new different types of groups emerging, really all throughout the country. I know I see some of it in the Midwest, but I also hear about it coming from New York and LA and that. There's, some groups really stay loyal to the tradition, release stuff that is really traditional that applies to people who have maybe been listening to jazz their whole life or have a certain preconceived notion of what jazz is. But there's also a lot of groups, people kind of my age, slightly older and slightly younger, who I think had a similar experience as me, who they grew up listening to straight ahead jazz, but they also listened to other genres. And then their new music is a reflection of that and is a unique fusion of different genres that I think does appeal to younger people or people who maybe thought they didn't like jazz. And I think those groups help kind of act as a gateway to get people exposed to, different types of music. Like I know the Bad Plus is a great example. I know a lot of people who didn't really know anything about jazz, but they're like, well, I really like this group, the Bad Plus. And, they cover these songs that I'm familiar with, and it kind of draws them in, and their ear gets more used to not only just instrumental music, but, they start to accept more dissonance in the music, more flexibility with rhythm and time signature. And I think it's a good way to get people more interested in listening to jazz and just a whole variety of music.
So what was one of the very first jazz shows you ever saw live?
Oh, man. Let's see. I was really lucky growing up near Chicago. A lot of the Chicago venues actually do let younger people in if they're with their parents, like Andy's and the Jazz Showcase. And I'm really lucky for that. I don't know if I can remember any of my very first, but I do remember I was lucky I got to see Roy Hargrove a lot before he passed, because he used to regularly play, I think it was Christmas to New Year's at the Jazz Showcase. I was really lucky I got to see him probably 4 or 5 times there, and that was really fun. And I was also fortunate, I know the Bad Plus played the Showcase a lot, and I got to see them regularly. I got to see the Village Vanguard Band. They came through and played a festival in the Chicago area. Yeah, it's hard to remember my very first, but I just remember I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. But now that I live in Indiana, in a different state where it's a little harder for young people to see live music, there aren't as many all-ages venues. I was definitely really lucky. Like, between those venues and the Chicago Jazz Festival, I was able to see a lot of big names at a young age and experience really exciting live music.
If you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see anybody from any era, who would you go see?
Oh, man. I would definitely want to see Cannonball Adderley. He was one of my first really big influences, and that would be really, really cool just to hear his big sound and, the energy. I think that would just be really cool to see someone like him. I think it would be really fun to see, kind of one of those, like the Duke Ellington Band in its prime. That would just be such a fun experience. Those are probably 2 of the big ones I would be most interested in, probably like the Duke Ellington Band and Cannonball Adderley.
So why do you love jazz?
Oh, there's so much about it that I love. I love the spontaneity that occurs in the improvisation, those unexpected moments, not only as a player but also as a listener, that sometimes can create really unexpected, intense musical moments that can just be really emotional, and you never know when they're going to happen, which is especially nice. It's not like, even though, like I said, I love rock bands, when you go see them live, you kind of know what to expect. It's usually going to sound like the record. You know where the high point is going to be, and it can be fun going to a jazz show, and, not everything's going to sound like the record, and you don't know as much to expect, which can sometimes make those intense emotional moments even more impactful when you're kind of along for the ride with the musicians. I also like that it's always kind of been a music that fuses different influences together early on, the music of Africa kind of combining with the music of Europe, that it's always kind of combining different influences. It can just be exciting to people who have so many different interests. So I think those are kind of the 2 big things that I like about it the most.
So everything's going to come down to this, and it's this. Everyone has their version or their interpretation of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you know yourself best. You live your life. Who do you think you are?
I think that I'm a very passionate person, and I think I'm someone who, as a musician, kind of that's where I show my emotions the most. I don't want to say I'm guarded, but I'm definitely someone who normally, won't let you see me super vulnerable in normal every life situations. I'm certainly not someone who's going to cry in public, but I think as a musician, that's where I let myself be vulnerable. I try to play with integrity and emotional honesty. I try not to, I don't think I'm a flashy person. I don't play in a way that's I'm going to show everybody, here's what I got. It's more to me about just the emotions and trying to express myself and kind of reach out to other people emotionally.
That's a great answer. Great way to wrap everything up. Amanda, thank you for taking a minute out to talk with Neon Jazz. Good luck with Flyover Country, and good luck with everything in your career. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Indianapolis, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Amanda for her time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.